Well, I apologize. I'm using my phone right now because I just recorded a video and I cannot get the memory card to work from my camera to my phone for some reason. So, whatever. And I don't have a laptop with me. But either way, this one is on idling versus running an APU. Because this seems to be like a really, like everyone wants to know the answer to this one. Which one's better? And I've had all my friends that are company drivers ask me about it because they know I've got an APU on my truck. And they're just like so dead set on, oh man, when I get my truck, I'm gonna put an APU on it. I'm gonna make sure I have an APU on my truck because I'm gonna save so much more money in fuel. And that may or may not be true. I personally am not using my APU. I have one on the truck, and I have used it, but it has already become my experience that APUs are not all they're cracked up to be. And I'm sure there are different APUs than mine and better APUs than mine that will get, I don't want to say better fuel economy because it seemed to be doing all right on fuel, but the amount of time that I have spent working on it and replacing parts and just generally messing with the thing to try and keep it running or running right, it's not worth my time. It's not worth my time at all. Now, in the idling thing, I figured out that in my truck with my engine, I have a Cat C15. It's a 2001 model Cat C15. It's got about 400 to 450,000 miles on it, ish, somewhere in there. Maybe about 455,000 miles is what it has on it. And this truck, I figured out because I've had to stop a few times, and shortly after I had already fueled up, so I knew that my tanks were full, and I knew how far I'd gone, and I know what my fuel economy is, and I heard about what I should be burning per hour in fuel by just idling. And this is just, through word of mouth and through doing research on the internet and everything like that. And generally speaking, you're looking at about a gallon per hour is what most people, places, and sites say. And, that sounded fair enough to me, but I still wanted to know my numbers for my engine. Well, I figured out mine. And my fuel economy on miles per gallon, if I'm running heavy, I'm getting about 5.63 miles to the gallon. And if I'm running light, I'm getting about 7.63 miles per gallon. And, any variation in between there, depending on wind and all that stuff. But either way, I knew how much fuel I burned out of my truck. And I let my truck idle for 10 hours before I fueled up, which is, you're going to be parked for your 10-hour break doing this stuff. And I went over and I figured out that I had, I should have about burned off 30 gallons out of my tank between the driving and between the idling, because I had used about 20 gallons in driving and 10 for overnight, according to these other numbers. Well, after having let it idle, went and fueled the thing up, and it took everything I had to get right at 25 gallons in there without forcing the tanks. I wanted to know what was in there without forcing the tanks full, and I put on 25 gallons. So that brought me to the conclusion that I'm actually burning closer. There's a truck backing up over here right now. The sun's gone. But that brought me closer to actually burning off a half a gallon per hour while idling rather than a full gallon, which was surprising to me. But then when I ran those numbers across with the effort that I've been putting into this APU, the amount of trouble it's been causing me, I've replaced an alternator on it, number one, And that was like that when I got the truck. I already knew before I had purchased the truck that it had an APU on it, but for some reason it wasn't working. That was all I was told. That was all I knew, because the previous owner did not investigate it, or at least they told me they didn't investigate it, and that was it. So I looked into that, and I put an alternator on it, which ultimately I needed to put a belt on it at the same time, because the alternator had seized up and then ate the belt, and that was that. Alternator cost me about $150 plus the time to take the old one off, put the new one on. All in all, that probably took about an hour, hour and a half total. Putting the alternator back in altogether, that was easy enough. That was like 15 minutes to get it back in. But the amount of time figuring everything out and getting around everything like that, that's where all the time was spent. And so, I ran the thing for a week, and it did great. Created heat, created power, did everything it was supposed to do, except for the fact that it was probably louder than actually just running the engine itself. And rather than the noise being in the front of the truck with the engine idling, the noise was in the back of the truck. And this stupid freaking APU is a Rigmaster, by the way, and I'm sure a lot of you, or some of you, are going to have something to say about that. And these things, I'm telling you right now, they are loud. This particular APU is loud, and it doesn't help anything. It's got an exhaust leak either, but it was loud, so it was no more quiet. I'll tell you that for a fact. And the amount of time that I spent in, checking the oil, putting oil in it, running through it, getting all the codes to clear off of the actual control panel, figuring out that it had bad sensors on it, disconnecting and then hot wiring bad sensors in order to make the thing run, because it was telling me it had low oil, low coolant, it was running too hot, and then the fan didn't work, and all these different things. Just the amount of time troubleshooting and fixing, repairing, hot wiring, loopholes, it doesn't matter. Anything that you're doing with that is I'm weighing into, is it better to idle the truck or is it better to run an APU? And by the grand scheme of things, they say that by using an APU, you're supposed to burn about 1/4 of the fuel of idling the truck. Now, based on previous knowledge, that would be about 1/4 of a gallon per hour. And I don't see where these numbers are coming from, because 1/4 gallon per hour is 1/4 of a gallon, which I was previously told. But my truck's only using about a half gallon, maybe a little over a half gallon per hour. So does that mean that my APU is only using an eighth, or are these numbers skewed in some way? I guess it all comes down to the end user and what you prefer. But I will tell you right now that if you weigh out the cost of the fuel, so overnight I'm burning approximately 5 gallons of fuel. 5 gallons of fuel. And I've got an incoming phone call right now, and I don't know what that is, so I'm just going to go ahead and decline that really quick. But either way, the cost of fuel overnight. So I'm burning about 5 gallons, call it 6 gallons. And it's fuel's about $3 a gallon, maybe a little bit more. So do the math on that. We're looking at somewhere between $15 and $18 a night. $15 and $18 a night if you're idling it every night while you're parked. And the only reason you should really be idling it is if you're honestly consuming that much power through your truck that you have to keep your batteries charged. Which, if you're running that many electronics in your truck, man, I think you need to reconsider a few things right there. Because me leaving my truck off for 2 days, 2.5 days at the house while I'm at home with my refrigerator left plugged in, just so I don't run my batteries dead, I'll come and fire it up about 2.5 days, every 2.5 days. And I stay home for 7 or 8 days at a time. And I'll let it run long enough to get the batteries charged up. So, the only real reasons to idle your truck are one, to create enough power to keep everything charged up. Man, the sun is like really getting me. To keep everything charged up and to stay warm. And I guess cool if it's hot outside. And in my opinion, it's just the amount of effort, time, money, and supplies, parts, whatever, that you're going to throw at this APU. You figure even if it does save you one, or even if it does only use 1/4 of the amount of fuel, and it does throughout the year, let's just throw a round number at the wall here and say that it costs you $4,000 a year to idle the truck, and the APU only costs you $1,000 a year in fuel to run. So yeah, you're saving $3,000 right there. But now, given the fact that I have put an alternator in this thing, I have gone through and I'm going to have to replace a starter relay because the starter relay went out. That's why I haven't even been running it, is because of that right there. And it's leaking oil now, so that's another thing. I got to figure out where that's at. And 2 of the other belts have to be replaced. And if I really want to get it done right, I have to replace a coolant sensor and an oil sensor and a cooling fan, which, all of these things you can get for a relatively decent price, relatively low cost, but at the end of the day, it's all falling right back into taking away from that savings. So, throughout the entire year, if you've only got the few minor things that happen, and you say that you spend $1,000 on fuel and $1,000 keeping the thing running and maintenance and everything else, you've saved $2,000. I mean, but then you got to factor in the time that you spent screwing with it if you're doing it on your own, and then the time, if you didn't do it on your own, the time and money that you spent to have someone else doing it. All in all, I mean, you're really coming out to being about the same thing, unless you've got a really top quality running unit that's not breaking down on you. But good luck with that. I mean, I'm sure they're out there. I'm sure it happens. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but the reality of it is that on every piece of equipment, you're eventually going to be replacing something. So I think it just is coming down to personal opinion. Do you want to idle your truck and take a little life off of your truck engine, or do you want to have the auxiliary one and run that and put the damage through that? It's the only thing that my APU is currently good for right now is the fact that I have an exemption, a weight exemption for it, so I can run a little bit more weight without getting in trouble, which is 460 pounds, I believe. So it's, in my opinion, idling versus APU, it's really, a shot in the dark. It's a shot in the dark, and it's the end user's opinion and what they choose to do. Because, I mean, just with my experience, the minute I started throwing a lot of money at mine, or any amount of money to make me go, is this really worth it, or should I just stop while I'm ahead? I cut my losses early and stop while I'm ahead until I can actually figure out what is going on with this thing. And I doubt that it's something small, because, I mean, when it worked great. It worked absolutely wonderful. But for the amount of fuel that I'm actually burning while idling, it's negligible, in my opinion. It's saving me time to just let the truck idle if it needs to idle, if it's seriously that cold. And I've only really needed to idle the truck one time. I was up in Wisconsin not that long ago, and it was absolutely just freaking throwing buckets and buckets and buckets of snow at us. And it was cold. It was very cold, and I let the truck idle. And that's the only reason why I did that. And I'm learning more and more that the idling thing, and I got another phone call here, the more and more the idling thing, again, is more just because people do it to do it. I've got a bunk heater down here that is probably even more powerful than my truck heater. My truck heater right now, shit, I'm sitting inside of this truck and the thing's off and I'm sweating. And it's like below 30 degrees outside here in Kentucky. And it's just, I mean, again, like I said, it's an opinion. And you really don't need to idle the truck a lot, especially if you've got a bunk heater. So, again, it comes down to personal opinion. And I believe that for my particular situation, the amount of fuel it's using, without continuing to ramble on and on and on here, is just, the amount of fuel is just, it's not that big of a difference. The cost of a hotel room would be more than $15 to $18 a night as it is. So it's a drop in a bucket. This is a business. If you're going to use the truck to idle overnight because it's keeping you more comfortable, everything costs money. It's a business. And if you're looking for staying comfortable because that's the only way to do it is to idle the truck, well, hey, you're paying for it. That's all there is to it. And I mean, you got to make a decision. Personally, I don't think throwing the money at an APU, because if I was to go and get a brand new one, you're looking anywhere, I've seen varying prices, brand new, rebuilt, whatever. You're looking at anywhere from like $5,000 on the low end, and I've seen stuff upwards of $12,000 installed, just depending on what you want, where you're going, who's putting it in, what kind of warranty you're getting. I don't see the payout on it. I mean, unless you got a good used one and you got it for really cheap and you're doing all your own maintenance, I just don't see it. I really don't. I'm probably going to invest a little bit more time into mine just to see where I can go with it. But the overall topic, and to answer my friends and some of my viewers' questions about this one, is it better to idle or is it better to run your APU? Fuel cost difference. It's not beneficial for me to mess with my APU currently. I haven't seen any upside to it. You look at the trucks out on the road, it's probably about a 50-50 of people actually having APUs and probably leaning more towards the side of people not having APUs. I think that, like I said, end user opinion, that's the way it's going to go on this one. The amount of fuel I use, like I said, is, probably slightly north of a half a gallon per hour. And that's if I crank the idle up a little bit, running at about 750, maybe 800. And I'm just getting, if I need any kind of power, heat, anything like that bad, I'll idle the truck. I mean, my bunk heater does more than enough for me. I don't need to idle for heat. Only time I'm really idling is because I'm jamming out on the TV and got their refrigerator working, or I got my hot plate in the back cooking away, making up some dinner. That's the only time I'm really idling anymore, because saving the fuel, yes, if you don't need to run it, don't run it. Save yourself some money, because $15 to $18 a night, that adds up. But if you're looking at it, that's what it's costing me on this cat. That's my opinion. I'm sticking to it. It's a utility type vehicle, a service vehicle. I mean, it's a piece of equipment. Take care of it. It should take care of you. So, again, like I said, that's my opinion. I'm sticking to it. APU versus idling. I'm going to idle it unless I can't idle it or don't need to idle it. APU costs me more money than what I feel it's worth at the moment in time until I find a better angle, and it's going to need something pretty big to catch my eye. Right now, I'm just going to stick with idling it. That's that. I will idle over the APU. Doesn't cost that much. Either way, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more, because I've got a few more coming up here. And everybody have a great day.